It begins as a whisper, a promise.
Cephalus. That's what I'll call you.
Hey sailors, and welcome back to the world of Eternum. We're only a week past when the delay was announced for New World, and we've had a lot of discussion going on regarding the future of what New World might entail, alongside other types of discussions of course. But this is one I wanted to single out specifically because mounts are a subject I've seen pop up not only in the alpha, but outside the game as well. Part of what sparked this discussion is when they replied to someone on their Twitter who asked about them. They stated that they have received some requests for mounts and it would be something that their developer team would look into. On top of this, I'm also very curious to know what all of your opinions on this are. For me personally, I've never really considered mounts an issue in game, because I've been so used to playing MMOs where they are a core or supporting factor in the gameplay. This includes traditional MMOs and all the sandbox MMOs that I played. Because of these experiences, I've always been very neutral whether a game has them or not. For the most part, it's never really affected my gameplay in a significant way. But one thing that did surprise me is when I first started testing this game's alpha and getting more entwined with the community, is learning about how many people had a major issue with them. There was even a thread started on the forums with the very same title, the Ask for Mounts. And while I don't really remember what everyone's exact opinions on them were, it seems like the people that did have issues with them were in certain circumstances. For instance, if you had played Ark Survival Evolved or even seen it, one of the things you're probably familiar with is that you can tame just about any of the dinosaurs and creatures. Some of these you can equip with a saddle, and not only can you get your hands on a ground mount, but flying mounts as well. This was something that did cause issues and did impact a lot of people's experiences in a big way. It's a whole different ballpark when it comes to things like PvP, when someone is able to scout out your entire base from the skies, or attack you from them and you have very limited ways of defending yourself. One thing they also eliminated was the anonymous aspect. With people using flying mounts, eventually they're going to find something with your name on it. Whether it be water pipes, visible crops, dino pens, it wouldn't be long until they find something of yours, and eventually they'll put two and two together and find out exactly where you are. And if it was an alpha tribe that found you, you were probably in a lot of trouble. From what I remember, a lot of people also felt like it got rid of the exploration aspect. It made the map feel a whole lot smaller, and you no longer really had the danger that you came across while traveling on the ground. It allowed you to bypass so many experiences, whether good or bad, and I can understand why people didn't like that, myself included. And this also transfers to traditional MMOs. You have certain ones like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, and a few others that also provide flying mounts. Now some games have implemented them pretty well to a degree. I used to thoroughly enjoy playing MMOs like Flife, and still remember the first time I got myself a broomstick. But over time it seems these games have tainted or oversaturated that aspect. I think that's part of the reason so many had an issue with mounts. And the second reason I would imagine is because of how closely tied they've become to cash shops. You'd see it all the time now in traditional MMOs. Getting the mount skins, mount equipment, and even sometimes the mounts themselves. You'd be buying them in the cash shop, getting them through loot boxes, all kinds of microtransaction related ways of getting them. Used to be where some of these games did it in a way where I feel the majority were okay with. World of Warcraft in its older days, for example. Before the in-game cash shop was a thing, if you wanted to get a really good mount skin, sometimes it was a rep grind, sometimes you got lucky in a dungeon or bought it from someone who did, and for the elite few, sometimes you had to take on some of the hardest raids in the game to get them, and recognition for doing so followed you wherever you went. I think this would be a system that people would still be okay with to a degree. It's just that games don't elect to do it. Back when I first started covering Ascent Infinite Realm, which is now renamed to Elian, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to start talking about this idea. I missed the time period where we did have different difficulties for content that separated the casual from the elite. It doesn't have to be something that's going to force you into difficult content to get anywhere, but having that option for truly hardcore players to take on content and get unique bonuses for it is something I would 100% agree with. And I think the third and final reason people would have an issue with mounts in New World is similar to the first issue I spoke of, where flying mounts could start to reduce the potential experiences, or in this case ground mounts, and diminish the exploration. So far it's been publicly stated that they are planning for this map to be around 40 kilometers squared, which is slightly bigger than the size of Skyrim as I mentioned before. Now what I can say is that during the 1,000 plus hours that I played New World, it's safe to point out that I did do a whole crap ton of running. And the exploration aspect that we usually get, and not wanting to bypass those experiences, that was fun for the first 150 hours or so. But then once I got to the 300 to 400 hour mark, it definitely did start to get a little stale. I saw a lot of people talking about how in their first 30 to 50 hours or so, they were already wishing for a mount system. Now Amazon did implement something to circumvent this. Two things actually, and they did both involve fast travel. I don't really want to go into more detail than that, but they were expensive methods and did help when it came to traveling around. But even with that, you still did a whole lot of running. There were even some quest lines that took you just about everywhere on the map to grind out the next chain. And this was the part of the game that I felt truly dragged on forever. Now overall, do I think the current system supports having mounts? I think it could work, but I will say that I would personally rather them expand the map or tackle other parts of the gameplay before doing so. But first we can talk about ways that it could work. Now I don't really like to mention or think about this game a whole lot, but one thing I will say about Black Desert Online, I did like what I saw when it came to the taming and breeding system. That game's mount system was one of the best I had come across in many ways. I like that we could go into the open world and tame wild horses, bring them back to the stables, level them up by riding them, and play around with different mount skills they had. It was pretty cool, and even more so when you combine the trading profession into that. In this game, I think something like that could work out a bit better and be more accepted than if you just bought them in the cash shop. If we have to work to earn them, maybe even maintain them, like feeding them, stabling them, maybe even different types of them like mules for starters and horses for endgame, I think that could definitely work. But I would again love for the map to be expanded before then. They've got a lot of room to work with because even though Eternum is just one island, they've already talked about bringing us to different places in the future and also mentioned a naval system. So that could mean bigger islands, same-sized islands, etc. There's also regions that could be added onto Eternum itself before that even happens. Another thing I saw people mention was horse carriages, traveling around and giving you the ability to hitch a ride to towns or outposts. I don't remember which MMOs I've seen do something like that. I feel like that's something we would see in Eastern MMOs, maybe one of the Chinese or Korean based ones I played. But I could see that being a good alternative if people don't want to go down the mount path. I'm more curious though, that if the idea we talked about became true, like taming and breeding them, would you guys as a community be okay with something like that? What would be interesting but also have the potential to get a little messy is if the mounts had a lifespan to make them more special. Or your mount could actually die if you let it get swarmed by mobs and don't park it somewhere safe, or stable it at an outpost. Overall though, on the negative side, there are some things I think would be a little problematic if we did have a mount system. First thing is opt-in PvP. Now I can't dive into detail on this, but if we added mounts into the mix, it would become much harder to catch people in PvP scenarios, which for some people, that might not be a problem. But if someone's doing a PvP mission inside a territory, you need to have a way to catch these people to prevent them from gaining influence, or disable mounts during the missions, because mounts would start to make that even more difficult. Another thing is mounted combat. Some games can pull it off. From what I remember, Red Dead Redemption, Mount and Blade of course, there's always potential for good mount systems, but there's not always the guarantee that mounted combat is going to be done right, or make sense for the game's combat system. And with the current weapons we've seen, I'm not sure if it would for quite a lot of them. Or if you look at games like Lord of the Rings Online, they could start developing it, but then just kind of stop halfway through and leave it in a broken state. And then the other two issues would be opening a door to flying mounts in the future and cash shop mount skins. I think the cash shop skins is the lesser of the two. I'm guessing nobody really wants to see flying mounts in a game like this. But for cash shop skins, I would predict that if they did incorporate mounts in the future, that at some point we would see mount skins in the shop. Unless they decided to go down the route of instance dungeons and raids. The only way I could see it working without too much backlash is if they made it where you could buy skins in the shop, but the mounts you had to get in game. I wouldn't expect something like this to happen before spring next year though. I think mounts are something they might have ideas for later down the line, like down in the timeline where they would pursue naval exploration. But I definitely wanted to talk about it today because I've been really curious to hear the public's opinion on this, and which situations would be acceptable or if none of it's acceptable. Also, I wanted to tell you guys that I was able to get confirmation on a few things. First thing is that there will be a density stress test on July 30th, but it will be under NDA. Also, of course, the August 25th event where anyone that's a tester, signed up for beta, or pre-ordered can join, and also that a third alpha test is in the works, but they don't have any specifics as to when it will happen. The density test was the main one I wanted to bring up, but I'm not sure if anyone outside the alpha will get into it. If you are a tester though, be sure to keep it in mind, because it sounds like that one will only last a day. But with that folks, that's everything I wanted to talk about today. Please let me know how you feel about the idea of a mount system. Maybe even one where we could have mules to carry our stuff around. Or a system where we either had traveling carriages and maybe merchant caravans. Drop it in the comments below. Thanks very much as always for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful night or day, and farewell.